What are your thoughts so far? Any ideas?
I
Anything I
love the
should
way that the jacket looks. It almost like it almost looks like it's a pattern, or is it light? It just there's something about it that gives I don't trust this guy now in a good way, right? Like there's something
mm,
now I'm like, does he know more than I thought he did? He hardly looks just like a, friendly chipper shop owner. He looks like he might have a couple secrets of his own,
mm,
which I think is really adds again that extra texture to is he being honest with us, or
right.
does he know something more about this clock that he's trying to get rid of it? Maybe he sees the door and he realized the only way to get rid of it is to pass this clock off to the next person.
Right.
Um,
I'm wondering now that you've said that, I'm like, maybe he should actually have like on his other hand, he's like wiping, like if I can draw it in a way where it looks like he's
mhm.
drawing,
Like he's
he's
almost
like
like,
wiping
yeah,
his face or something.
yeah.
Um, I'll play around with that a little bit and make sure it doesn't mess with it too much, but um, yeah, something where he's like patting himself down a little bit.
Mhm.
I'll work on that. I'm not sure
Yeah,
that's the way
and
to
I
go.
think too that, back to my part of the story, I can change a little bit of how he talks about the clock, where he, can initially be like, "Oh, you probably don't want it, it doesn't work, but I can give you a good deal," right? So maybe he doesn't try and redirect him as hard. He is kind of okay with the fact that this kid wants it, right? Like maybe there's a little bit more of him sending them to the back of the shop, hoping that the child chooses the clock because he can't I mean, again, we have to figure out all the lore of it, but it's almost like he can't tell the kid to take the clock because it doesn't work that way. The kid
Mhm.
has to choose the clock. So he's a little stressed because it's like, is the kid actually going to make the right choice? Because I can't say, here, take this clock with you.
So if okay, so we have this panel here where they're interacting with each other.
Mhm.
What should she be pointing at something or like pointing towards him or like
Yeah,
what?
I almost think that she should be like, because the mom is trying to be like, but anything else but that clock. So it's almost like she's sort of like, maybe pointing at something else, right? Like, or maybe in her hand, she has something else, and the little boy's like, "No, I
Mm,
don't want that," right? Like, maybe she has, I don't know, like a little ornament of some kind or something like that, that she's like, "Here, this is cute," and he's like, "Nope, I don't want that."
okay, well that makes me think maybe they're standing by something and
Like a little
um,
table of some kind.
yeah. So he's going, "What do you want?" And she's maybe pointing at something on like what were we saying? Like a radio?
Yeah.
So yeah, you can draw like a little radio of sorts. Maybe it's at a bit of an angle there so we see it a little bit better. Where you that's it, that works. So something where we can see it a little bit more clearly. So this is one of those things where it's like the beauty of doing this digitally is that we can just come up with ideas on the spot and there's not like having to redraw everything. We can just throw it in there and then, you know,
Mhm.
the it works compositionally and then we'll go from there if it needs to be like like redrawn in some way. But I think in this situation, I left enough space that this worked really well.
Well, and it's neat again because, like, we've done previously, going at it the second time around and seeing are these panels working as hard as they should be, right? Like this there's more detail going in that wasn't there before, and it worked before, and it was, perfectly fine, and it was this nice little contained story, but now with these extra details going in, the story just becomes that much richer.
Yeah. Also, like I have to be okay with the fact that this is not going to be like a fully finished drawing. Like
Mhm.
this is just meant to be. I mean, we're going to take a little bit longer than the 30 minutes that we had suggested, just because like I want to be able to get this to a good place. But
Mhm.
either way, it's one of those things where I can't be so precious with this. I can't really think about, okay, is the figure perfect? Is the
Mhm.
value of this the way I'm valuing, light and shadow and stuff like that? Is that correct? I just have to go with a bit of instinct. You notice I'm not
Yep.
zooming in at all.
Yeah.
I'm not looking super close at detail because if I do, I'm going to start to see those mistakes and then you're going to start to get distracted by it. So better for me just at this point to think about like the composition, the basic um, form, and making sure everything looks right, but doesn't necessarily, it looks or feels right. It doesn't have to be perfect.
And that's also a really good exercise to do, when you're starting out is give yourself some time restraints, right? Because sometimes you can get so into redoing, correcting, changing that you get sort of stuck, right? And you go around and around and around where it's like in 30 minutes and 40 minutes and an hour, I want to be done this. Let's see what I can do. And then you'd be surprised how far you can get and what you can create when you don't get stuck in your own head and in endless loops of perfection. Because you can always go back and, if it's words, you can go back and edit and clean it up. If it's, your illustrations, you can go back and do another pass and clean it up. But you got the idea down and you didn't spiral yourself around and around on something that in that moment wasn't as important as it felt like it was.
Exactly. Like this does, if you want to look at it, if you've been watching our door series where we're doing thumbnails right now, if you want to look at it in that perspective where this is just another thumbnail, maybe a little bit bigger than what I would normally work in, but
Mhm.
that's the whole idea behind it is, you're not so precious with what you're drawing. You're just trying to get down the essence of the story and trying to make sure that you're not losing anything in the real rough, quick drawing that I had done previous. As I had
Mhm.
mentioned, I want to keep the feel of it and make sure that some of this, some of these lines that I drew, while like very quick, there's something really beautiful about them, really
Mhm.
it just interesting. There's something really interesting about them, and that's important to keep as you're developing, right? It's really, really hard to keep. Like that's what you're trying to do.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing, right? Is like it's keeping the feel, the essence, the story, and knowing that things can be tweaked down the road, but you don't want to lose any of those really interesting elements in in an attempt to perfect something and then you lose something that was actually really important to the story, but you were so focused on making sure that that hat looked absolutely perfect that you lost a story element.
Yeah, and it's believably easy, or unbelievably easy to do, like where you just slightly change, skew something, and all of a sudden it just doesn't work anymore, and you're like, "What did I do? Oh my
Now you
god!"
gotta take some steps back and be like, how come it worked before and now it suddenly just doesn't?" And that happens
Yeah,
with words too, right? Like you begin writing something and then you go off on a tangent because something struck you. And by the time you're done, you're like, whoa, I was, going straight down this river and suddenly I'm on a stream in a different direction. And I don't even know how that happened because I kind of lost focus in an attempt to perfect something, prose wise versus just getting the story down.
yeah. So I'm having just while we're talking, I'm having a little difficulty with this center, figuring out exactly where the clock is.
Mm,
And here's one thing that I'm not really thinking so much about, but I also think because I've been doing this for so long, it's okay. Which is, if I were to have word balloons here, where would I put them?
right.
Um, I think even if I were to look at this now, without thinking about like what the dialogue is going to be, there are places for me to put the word balloons. And since we're doing this in a very unique way, let me ask you this:
Mhm.
how would you adapt what you would if we were to take that story you wrote and add some dialogue to it? How would you adapt now that you've seen how detailed or the type of composition this is? What dialogue you would put here?
I would keep it really simple. I think that having the story sort of to fill it in and, just having, maybe the shopkeeper have something like, "You want the clock," or like, the clock question mark or something like just really, really pointed, very simple dialogue because I think that this is very much a visual story, like the image with a companion story with it, right? So I wouldn't probably put too many word bubbles in here and cover some of the texture of the visual because we do have the story that goes along with it.
Right. So I'm going to just have to let go of this a little bit. The I think the perspective on it is slightly off, but it's one of those things where it still works. I think you
Hmm.
tell me if this feels
Yeah,
like it will. Um, right, we can still see the clock, and I'm going to actually make it a little bit more obvious that there's a clock there.
I think it still absolutely works.
Good. You just here's the beauty of having a second person where I would be working, and seeing the artist, only sees these things that everybody else wouldn't. And then,
Yes.
having somebody kind of over your shoulder going, it's okay.
Yeah. From a storytelling point of view, I absolutely get the leap between the two, right? There is nothing about that I'm like, that doesn't feel like the same clock. Like, nope, it works.
Yeah, well, and that's it. Like considering how quickly we're doing this, and I'm just trying to
100%.
tell the story as well as possible, but not necessarily worrying about, is the art in this going to be like so beautifully illustrated that everybody's gonna comment on that, right? It I think story is more important at the end of
Yeah.
the
And I
day.
think because of the kind of story we're trying to tell with this as well, is you can make some of these leaps, right? That there is something that isn't maybe 100% perfect or the perspective's a little different, but this is something that's creepy and off-putting. So those things are a little bit more allowable in that space. Um, so I think it works absolutely.
Yeah. And then it's just trying to figure out like little details of like how to get the boy and the mother to hold hands so that it looks like that's what they're doing. And then
Mhm.
it's got a obscenely large head, uh, which I'm going to keep just because there's something very creepy about the kid
Yeah.
uh, unto itself, right? So
Yeah. And that's sometimes too one of those things that, visually you do is there's something and you can't always pinpoint what makes something creepy, right? But the proportions like that being a little bit off is strange, right? Like you're like, this child feels different. Like there's something about it that's a little bit creepy.
yeah, um, but that just adds another layer of like,
Exactly.
this kid going to be a little bit more involved in his story than we think, right? The whole idea of the kid bringing this
Hmm.
clock home and being the kind of kid that he is. Well, the clock, because of him being very open as a conduit, that the
Yes,
clock can easily reach out to this child that wouldn't.
exactly. So the child might play more into the clock's ability to do things, right? And the door's ability to appear. Like maybe this child goes through the door and gets answers and chooses to pass the clock on. Like there's so much, again, because we haven't gone beyond that part of the story because this was only about the broken clock and this one page. It leaves us open to those possibilities. And what we found from, the door, which started as simply there's a door in this apartment and it doesn't open and nobody knows why and it's creepy, has now kind of expanded into this whole, you know, universe of doors. And now a clock has come into it that passes like so one simple idea can bloom if you put enough into it that you're like, this feels like it could go different places. I don't have to go all of them right now, but I'm leaving it open that it could.
Yeah, well, that's right. Like, is the kid somehow going to be center to the story that connects the door
Hmm.
to the clock to potential other stories that we decide if we decide to do
Yeah,
that. Uh,
exactly.
it'd be
And truly,
interesting.
this all came from the prompt of a broken clock. We could have taken this in any direction, and it just sort of wound its way back into this universe, that it takes place in the same universe as the door. Um, but this, like we were saying, it was one simple idea that kind of told its own story.
Yeah. And am I drawing the door behind
Yeah,
the
I was just
kid,
gonna say, which
or is
would
it
make
just a
sense
regular door?
because that would be there somewhere.
Yeah. A door would be there. Is it the door? We don't know.
We don't know. We
Uh,
don't need to know. That's those things
mm,
you leave there, and then later you're like, "Oh my gosh, there was that door in the background. I didn't even notice."
mhm. Okay, so we're getting this last panel. I just want to make sure. So I'm just going to go back to showing my guides. I want to see. So one of the things, those blue lines, I want to make sure that if we were to print this,
Mhm.
that the um, wherever there is art, if there is art that may get trimmed by the printer, it's not precious art. So what I'm doing here, I think, is here we go. This is the oh, excuse me. Um, I am going to just shift this panel up so that his head doesn't get like weirdly cropped. And if when it does come to printing, if we decide to go in that way, it's always good to kind of think about these things ahead of time.
Yeah.
Just just because you don't know. Um, so I think
Well,
I've
you're better to
decided.
be prepared for it and not print it than decide to print it and realize you have to change a lot of things in order to make that possible. It's good to sort of know where things lay, in that respect, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I always like to. It's one of the things that I think, somebody who's coming to you with a story idea, and if you're coming with a lot of experience, or if you understand the process in a way where you can actually foresee certain issues, then
Mhm.
you want to be able to use that experience so that you can actually make sure that, like, hey, are you planning on doing this? And the person that is commissioning you may not have even thought of it, and because of
Yes.
that, you're now going to solve problems that they didn't even realize they were going to have, which is always a really great way for you to potentially get hired by that person again.
Absolutely, and save yourself some headache in the long run if you do something and then they suddenly tell you, "Oh, didn't I mention it needs to be in this dimension or printable in this way," or something like that, because they might not think it's important to tell you in the beginning, but it can make a huge difference to what you're creating, and you need to know those things to go.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of the reasons why I do get the same clients over and over, because they know what to expect. The questions that they don't even know they should be asking, I'm going to be giving them information on, and there's a lot of relief in that, and it builds a trust, and therefore it means that as you said, you'll get that repeat client. And for you, the whole idea of doing this kind of stuff over and over again, well, you'll start to figure out some of these problems that could happen, and hopefully then you'll start to go, okay, I need to make sure that I remember to tell whoever I'm working with that this
Mhm.
could be something we want to talk about early on, even though it's not something to think about now, like the printing of
Mhm.
something you may be just doing as a web series, let's say.
Exactly, and so much of your expertise and your ability to point out these things is from having something go wrong, right? You learn to ask that question in the beginning because the time that you didn't ask that question, it was an issue and you had to redo things or change things or deal with something that didn't print properly. And then going forward, you know to always ask that question up front. So a lot of these things are just built on experience, right? So if you can learn from people that have been doing it a while and some of the things they've seen along the way, you might be able to ask those questions in the beginning as opposed to have to experience the issues of when you don't ask those questions.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're doing what we're doing is we want to help
Exactly.
give you the information so that you actually can refer back to this and go, "Oh, that's something I didn't even think about that they mentioned. Where was that again? I'm going to go and watch, I think here." And then, that way you can use that information to help with your own project.
Exactly, and that's why we're sharing all of these various steps that often get glossed over and missed because from a storytelling creative point of view, they're incredibly important, but you don't really hear about them from, when you see a finished work, you don't know all of the teeny tiny steps in between that got you there, but that's why we're sharing them so that it demystifies some of that.
Exactly. And that's pretty much sums up this whole series is that
Mhm,
this is not magical. You can see there's steps of process that you have to do. I mean, in some ways, yeah, there is some magic, I guess, but only in the sense of like um, when we're collaborating together, having two people with
mhm,
idea that wouldn't have existed without those two people together.
mhm.
But the whole ideas that go into creating a comic or some kind of storytelling is accessible to everybody. And because of that, it means that you can do this if you know how to go from A to B to C. And that's what we want to show you.
Exactly, and it's like you hear with most people, it's like, "Oh, they were an overnight success," or "They just created this and became, famous," or whatever. Nobody's an overnight success. It's the 10, 15, 20 years of work behind the scenes doing what you need to do to, hone your craft, whatever that is, then having somebody discover it, see it, etcetera, that is that overnight success, right? It's just somebody just found them overnight. It didn't mean that they just started.
That's right. Yeah. It's a lot of that's the what is it, the 10,000 hours of work to put into something so that it looks like it's an effortless thing that you've created. It doesn't have to be 10,000 hours, but that's the idea behind it. It's something that looks effortless, but takes decades of experience. And that's why
Exactly.
you need to value what you do because even though it looks like it's something that didn't take a long time to do, and it maybe by the time that you've gotten to a certain level, it doesn't take a lot of time for you to do, but you
Mhm.
need to make sure that what you're doing, um, is valued properly because there are so many years and years and all different all the things that you can't see, the hours of education and watching YouTube channels like ours where you're learning
Mhm.
and seeing and failing and learning from those failures that you get to a point where hopefully you can do what we're doing here and then charge, enough that it is a livable, thrivable wage.
Exactly, because what you're charging for, as Keith just said, isn't the how long it takes you to do something, because quite often, the longer you've been doing it, the faster you are to complete that thing, only because you have experience, you've done it for a long time, you're skilled, all those you've been well educated in it. So just because you're fast doesn't mean you should be cheap or inexpensive. It means that you are good at what you do.
Right.